there, my name is Max, and I made this one video that you might have seen called Enigma's Exasperation, which won the International 5 Short Film Contest. I know this is gonna sound really cliche, but I wanna say thank you for your support, everybody. Couldn't have done it without you, and man. You know, I think this has been like really the highlight of the year, perhaps even of the decade, because like, you know, just picture being in the middle of an entire crowd, a huge stadium like the Key Arena, right? And you're in the middle of a huge crowd that's laughing and cheering for something you made. There's really nothing quite like it. But I didn't come here to brag about it. I'm here because, as the first, in a way, Source Filmmaker 2 movie, and as somebody who used SFM1 a lot, I have a lot of tips and tricks, information, knowledge to share about, you know, the differences between both versions. You know, all the tips and tricks that I've come up with and that I've used in order to make the movie in 2 weeks. How all of it was made, you know, our thought process. Because I also made this with 2 people. Do not forget about them. I do not like being credited as the one and sole author. No, people help me. People always help me. Do not forget about them. That's not nice. So yeah, anyway, all of this to say, I'm gonna go ahead and explain stuff about the movie. First, I'm gonna talk about the more general topics, like, you know, the Enigma remodel, because you see it throughout the whole movie. Then I will be going on a shot-by-shot basis and explain more or less everything, you know, show the progressions, the drafts that we had originally, that sort of stuff. Here we go. Hey, please bear with me, I'm gonna be just a little longer on camera, because I wanna talk also about how the idea of the movie came up first, right? You see, at first, Huff, also known as Michael Shilliday, or Hot Coffee, but that's his old nickname, made this pretty cool looking Enigma remodel, and I was like, you know what, dude, I wanna make a movie with that. And then the short film contest was announced, so, you know, lucky timing, I guess. But you see, I figured, you know, I kind of want to try to make something a little comedic, a little funny in a minute, because, you know, a minute seems like, you know, you just crack 3-4 jokes and then you're done. Building up drama or hype, I didn't think that would work so well. And I did have a hunch that, you know, this is what many entries would try to do anyway. But why would you do that? Because, I mean, Valve does a really good enough job at hyping themselves up in the tournament already, so what's the point, you know? It would be pretty redundant, yeah. So, I figured, you know, the video would be separated in 2 parts. First, Enigma really hyping himself up his pains. Oh, I'm a god, oh. And then he goes down to the Earth, the Dota map, and his teammates are terrible. The enemy lineup is terrible, and the RNG is terrible. And then he's like, oh, I'm a god, but you guys, oh no, this is all beyond saving. I'm out. And man, you know, I didn't want the jokes to be, you know, there as Peruvians, Russians, am I right, fellow gamers? No, fuck that. Yeah. Like, the last thing I really wanted to do is be, like, it's just perpetrate, you know, this kind of toxic smog of slight casual racism, bigoted sexism, whatever, you know, in the gaming community, because it's already really bad as it is. And man, you know, the community being what it is, there was really no way to really like prevent that entirely. I do hope that I've diminished it, you know, but well. Anyway, so yeah, that was the idea of the movie, pretty much. And to give you an idea, you see, at first I thought the Enigma hype segment, the one in space, I thought it was gonna last 40 seconds. That is to say, how much I didn't realize how short a minute was going to be. It is by far the biggest constraint of the whole film. It really taught me an enormous amount of lessons. And, you know, in the end, it's 19 seconds. So it was half of what I originally expected. So yeah, that's... we're gonna go on the shot-by-shot breakdown soon, but first, we're gonna talk about the Enigma model and the Enigma voice. So there it is, Enigma's new model, shiny, and a lot better than the old one, not that this was a hard task to accomplish. In hindsight, however, there are a couple of decisions that I wish I had not taken while doing the technical work on this. The biggest downside, I think, of this model is that I decided to reuse Valve's original Enigma skeleton onto the new model. And you see, this was a bit of an issue because the old model does not have the same proportions as the new one. Here they are overlaid on top of each other. So they are, I'm simplifying a bit here, but they are in their bind poses, the pose in which the models were modeled. And as you can see, they really don't match. And the proportions don't match either. It was not going to be an easy job, and it wasn't. So what I had to do in order to reuse the skeleton was to take the old model and then, one by one, take its bones and rotate them around, move them around, so that they would match the new proportions. And here's what it looks like now. So it's a really close match, really. It's pretty damn close. Let me do a little on-off switch here. You can really see how the arms get stretched out on the old model. Gross. But anyway, the big issue with my decision, among others, really, there's really several downsides to this. The thing is, I had way too much faith in Valve, and it turns out that their original skeleton is actually really awful. Check this out. Check out how completely out of alignment their bones are. How they don't really make sense compared to the actual mesh? Yeah, it's just weird. And then there's this neck. The neck bone should, ideally speaking, really not be this far back. It should more be in the middle. This is anatomically correct, but in video games, in 3D models, for deformation purposes, you do not want the anatomically correct route, if you see what I mean. Because this is not what will help you to get the best looking result for deformation purposes. It means that I have some really weird looking deformation over here. I managed to somewhat mitigate it in the weight mapping stage, but you know, it could still be a lot better than this. This theoretically allowed me to reuse Enigma's existing animations, but with a catch, I still had to modify those by hand to fit the new proportions. It was just a matter of moving the bones around, but still, I'm not sure that this was worth it. All around me are familiar faces, worn out places, and these are morph targets for Enigma. These are going to be driving a facial animation. The thing is, actually the huge majority of models doesn't really use bones for the face anymore. It will be pretty hard to do too. Morph targets are a lot easier. Most Dota characters use about 60 morph targets, more or less, TF2 HWM characters use 300 of those. And then they are grouped up into what we call flex controllers in the source engine. The thing is, I do not have access to those because I am using FBX for exporting, but as far as we are aware, because there's no documentation on these, classic Valve, flex controller rules are defined in DMX metadata, DMX being Valve's format, and I can only use FBX for the time being, which means I am locked out of such a feature. You see, Enigma does not have a mouth, but it still has all of the flex controllers and morph targets which would be associated with having a mouth and a jaw. This is because we suspect that Valve is auto-generating morph targets with a fancy Maya mail script or internal tool for every Dota character. If you look at the morph rules here, you'll notice, this is pretty straightforward. This is what happens for me when I imported Enigma with my FBX. So it's a one-to-one mapping. But Valve does a lot of fancier stuff like this. And I don't have access to it. Which means lip syncing, I can pretty much forget about it. It doesn't really matter because Enigma does not have a mouth, but he does have mouth motion in-game. So, like I said, it's not a huge loss, because no mouth, but still, would have been nice. Hopefully Valve documents that. They're never gonna do it. But yeah, hopefully Valve documents that.
But wherever I go, even I cannot escape the pool of the war between ancients.
Yeah, that's me doing the Enigma voice right there.
But wherever I go, even I cannot escape the pool of the war between ancients.
And yeah, it was a bit of a challenge. I really tried to think lines through because, as you know, Enigma is a really peculiar, cold and distant character. It really had to sound like something he would actually say, a continuation of his existing in-game voice lines. Let's listen to this earlier draft of the movie, Something's Different.
I have torn galaxies asunder, yet one pull inexorably draws even me, the conflict between ancients.
This voice line was changed because, first off, it was too long, but even if it hadn't been, it was not easy to understand. And if you add my accent and the voice filter on top of that, that's not good. So I was trying to find this constant balance between simple, easy to understand sentences, short lines, and still sounding like Enigma. It really makes you appreciate the craft of writers, because that's the kind of stuff that they have to deal with, I'm sure. So, of course, I am not Valve, and I am nowhere near as experienced as whoever did all the audio filtering for character voices, so I had to resort to trying to imitate their filters. Here's what my voice sounded like without them.
I am the beginning and the end. I am Enigma. I have torn galaxies asunder.
Pretty raspy stuff, but I can make it even raspier and rougher.
I am the beginning and the end. I am Enigma.
So this is done using a pitch shifter and flanger. Flanger is a fairly simple effect. The thing with the pitch shifter is that it's happening in real time, which means the pitch is shifting, but the time isn't. Let's add reverb.
I am the beginning and the end. I am Enigma. I have torn galaxies asunder.
This is starting to get somewhere. However, I need more reverb. To be precise, if you listen to Enigma's lines, there is sort of a trail in that leads into the lines. And the best way that I knew to imitate it was using reverse reverb. However, this could not be done in Audition with real-time filters. So it's time to get into Sony Vegas.
But wherever I go, even I cannot escape the pool of the war between ancients.
Let's add some echo.
But wherever I go, even I cannot escape the pool of the war between ancients.
If you listen very closely to Enigma's lines, this is what's there.
I cannot escape the pool of the war between ancients.
It's subtle, but it's there. Once that was done, I exported that out, took that file back in again, then reversed it, then applied the reverb into that reverse version. Then I export this reverse version with reverb out, I get that back in, I reverse it again so it's back into the regular way, and I overlay it under the regular thing from step 1.
But wherever I go, even I cannot escape the pool of the war between ancients. Yet one pull inexorably draws even me.
My first and biggest concern for the movie was that Dota 2 does not support skyboxes, and SFM2 doesn't either. Therefore, we put a skydome in place. It's just a circular model, it's half a sphere, and it's textured and it's unlit, which means it is not affected by any of the lighting. If I toggle off everything, it is always the same color. However, it is affected by fog. I wish it wasn't, but it is. You might be wondering how comes that it's covering such a small surface area. I'll get more into that later, because it has to do with lighting. One of my biggest annoyances with making a movie set in the Dota universe is that the map is pretty much entirely flat, and it is painfully obvious seen from ground level. It's not very aesthetically... Alright, it doesn't look good. In Reborn, the Dota map is organized using tiles, and those tiles can only go about, I think it's 64 units up or down at a time. So subtle height changes, not so much. You can collapse tiles back into their individual components, which is to say, the displacement, the meshes, and all the vegetation props, that sort of stuff. The thing is, even though then you could start manually changing the displacement like you wish, you can start painting on it, it's all nice and stuff, but then the vegetation that was a part of the tile will not keep following the displacement. So if I was gonna, do that to the whole map to introduce subtle height variations that look nice, I might as well just start the whole map over and, rethink it from the ground up to have a proper scale for movies, because right now everything is really conceived to be seen from the top down, and heroes are the size of trees, or maybe it's trees that are the size of heroes. I started by making a copy of the Dota map, then going where my shots were taking place, and spray painting vegetation where I needed to fill in the blanks. This is pretty much how it works. It was a little harder than that, because I only wanted specific plants, and the way it works is that I'm like, well, I'm gonna select this dot right here. Oh, wrong plant. Let's try this again. No, wrong plant. This, no. And that over and over until I would get the plants that I wanted. So everything you see here, that wasn't here. It's here to fill the foreground of this shot. If I go back to the regular Dota map, you'll notice, pay attention to this spot and this spot. It's a lot more empty, isn't it? I've also done landscaping work from inside the SFM. If you've ever looked at the Dota map from ground level, you'll have noticed that the trees are not so good when seen from that angle. And that's normal, because they're optimized to be seen from the top-down gameplay angle of the game. So when I have a shot from, ground level, it's not so good. So what I did was placing trees over the existing trees. If I remove them, you'll see that's not so good. If I remove the map altogether from the SFM, it's a lot easier to tell what I spawned from within the SFM as opposed to what's part of the map. Reborn comes with quite a few SFM-specific models that are really useful. If we look at the movie without the map, you'll notice how much landscaping work has effectively been taking place in order to make the map look better from a movie angle. But there's one shot I really want to talk about. Here's why. There is one thing that I really hold dear to my heart in video games. It's this feeling that this universe you're going through is far bigger than you, that there's a whole world out there. It's really exciting to me. It's a feeling that is really hard to convey in games that fall under the general umbrella of Tolkien-ish fantasy, because that's been done again and again and again and again. But generally, where the fictional world gets outlandish, and for lack of a better term, alien, that's when it gets really good. I think this screenshot from The Longest Journey really shows what I'm talking about. Point-and-click adventure games from the late 80s and 90s really got that right. The art by Mark Ferreri absolutely nails that. This is the kind of stuff I want to see in games again. But it's not just about how original a world is. That was me getting sidetracked a little. What I love seeing in games is consistency. That small detail in the background that ties the world together. Bear with me for a second here, because the example I'm gonna use is Super Mario 3D Land. Look at the level backgrounds. There are beautiful landscapes extending long into the distance. It's nice. Then look at its sequel, Super Mario 3D World. Most levels are just floating in a void in the middle of nowhere. That really disappointed me.
Go across.
These 2 seconds of a background showing a lush forest, a valley, a mountain range in the distance, that is what they represent to me. I really wish the Dota map expanded visually beyond its borders, and that you could see the surrounding mountains, plains, rivers, chasms, lakes around it. This is the original 2D drawing by Hoth, and this is my Frankensteined up version to integrate it better within the scene. The mountains also show up in the background of a few other shots. The placement is only very vaguely consistent, but it's impossible to tell. I'll talk a little more about the mountains in a shot-by-shot breakdown, but first, a few general words about the lighting. Dota 2, as you might be aware, already has pretty nice global shadows. However, there's a bit of a limitation. They automatically wrap themselves around the camera first time, so observe what's gonna happen as I slowly pull the camera up. The shadows quickly get far blurrier, because as far as the camera is concerned, it starts seeing the horizon. So all of a sudden the shadow map has to cover a lot more ground. Straight up disabling the global light shadow and using your own lights altogether is not really a usable workaround, because it changes the shading of models in unpredictable ways. As you can see here, without the global light shadow, the shading on Axe's torso looks way different. Because the global light automatically wraps itself around what the camera can see, the only course of action is to limit what the camera can see. This is accomplished by reducing or raising the Z-near and Z-far clipping planes. Anything closer than this value and further than this value simply ceases to exist in the eyes of the camera. The default values of 24 and 24 thousandths are really bad, as you can tell by the shadow map display here and the shadow around Spirit Breaker's feet. What I did was to fit the values as close as possible to the scene in each shot. With a Z-near of 128 and a Z-far of 4500, it's a lot better. My draw distance is effectively very limited, and this is why the Skydome doesn't cover a lot of ground, as I was mentioning earlier. However, you might notice that this really doesn't look like what I have in the movie. It's a lot more flat. This is because I did not rely on the global light alone and mixed in my own solution. I I only left the existing global light at about 30 to 50% of its original value. This produces a lighting with a lot more contrast and depth to it. There is a huge difference between the lighting found in Dota 2 and that of older Source 1 games. Here, in SFM1, I've placed a really powerful but tiny light that gets spread over a large radius, and as you can tell, it all shades correctly. The same thing in SFM2 gives a really washed out result. This is because the rendering pipeline in Dota 2 is deferred without high dynamic range. Here's a short explanation. In SFM1, anything that was pure white on your screen actually had information to represent and store how bright it was past that point. This information gets used when compositing all of the progressive refinement samples together. SFM2 doesn't have HDR, this data is missing. On top of that, Dota 2's hero shader reacts pretty differently than other Source 1 games to color changes and some weird lighting situations. Specular, for instance, really gets blown out by lights. So characters that were inside of my custom sunlight solution needed to get their colors halved most of the time. So we go from this really overblown skin to this, which looks a lot more natural. So that's it. This pretty much covers all of the general topics that I wanted to address, so we're gonna move on to a shot-by-shot breakdown now. But first, there is one last thing that I need to bring up. And it is that ever since I rendered the movie in early July, Valve has brought some changes and bug fixes to the SFM's lighting. One of these bugs was affecting sample distribution in the radius of lights. But it's a bug I only noticed and then reported while I was making the Earth scenes. The space part of the movie effectively relied on this glitchy lighting. The lighting that you're gonna be seeing is a bit different than what I had on my screen 2 months ago. Even though the first shot is pretty straightforward, I have quite a few things to say about it. The first thing that many people will notice is the really nice looking depth of field bokeh here. The reason it stands out so much is partially caused by the lack of HDR that I was talking about earlier. The light from the stars would be a lot more faint otherwise. Pretty straightforward shot, just zoom out on Enigma's face. Orange and blue is a little overdone as a color design, but it's an effective introduction, I think. Not too fancy, it's not too boring, it's alright. I'm gonna go back to my main camera now and... Hey, Max, wait a second, it's all different, what's happening, did you change something? And no, I did not. As you might have guessed, the position, rotation, and some attributes of elements within particle systems, like every single star here, the position of all the sprite clouds in the nebulae, that sort of stuff, that's all random. And it's supposed to be determined using a seed, which means that even though all of this is random, every time you're gonna run it using the same seed, you will get the same randomness every time. So it will not change across every simulation of the particle system. However, SFM2, for some reason, it doesn't work. So every time I just scrub forwards or backwards one frame, if I just scrub normally even, it just regenerates randomly. The only solution that I had was to just keep rendering the scene over and over and over and keep looking at the first few frames until I was like, okay, you know what? This background, this specific regeneration of the particle systems, that looks good. It has nice framing. I'm keeping that one. I think I re-rendered the beginning of every space shot like 5 or 6 times. I got kinda lucky. This is one of 2 shots where Enigma has the eye beams thing, the light that comes out of his eyes. He has much bigger one in-game that are made out of particles, but they're meant, they're designed to be seen from above, and closing in on that, as you can see, it doesn't work. It's not meant to be seen from this angle. And they completely obscure his eyes, which are a big part of the only expressive facial features that he has. In my movie, the beams are made using 2 tiny spotlights stuck inside his head. It's pretty straightforward, really, as you can see here. A little touch that I haven't pointed out yet is that Enigma actually has self-illuminated eyes, and it's also a little faintly around his eyes because I really wanted, the feeling that it came through his skin, if you could call it skin. Whatever flesh he has, it's kind of, the light is leaking a little bit through it. It's a very subtle effect in the movie, but it's there and I like it. In the second shot, I took the bold, risky decision to introduce a revolutionary new color, green. Wow! Yeah, so not really much to say here. This is a good particle generation here, but I'm sure if I... See, now that's a bad one because I really wanted to have this sort of empty space, and here it just feels bad. So I'm just gonna keep generating, and maybe, hopefully, I'll find a good one. This is bad, this is bad. So yeah, I just kept regenerating until I found something good. This is a lot better. Nice empty space behind him. I don't know why the... Oh, green light missing, here it is, okay. As I was also saying during the lighting part, making good-looking rim lights is really tough. In the Dota shader, like there's a dedicated rim light parameter, but it's not controlled. You cannot affect it through lights. It's only controlled through the map's ambient light. So if I turn on the map light scale over here, you're gonna see the rim light actually fades in. I'm gonna turn off all the lights so you can see this. You can see here, the rim light slowly fades in and there it goes. Like this. So that's what the actual rim light is, for the most part. You can really see it here. And that's the kind of nice rim light that I cannot have using just the SFM lights like this. Sadly, can't have that. The grabby hand shot is one of my favorites, but first off, I figured I should show what came before that. This was the second ever draft of the movie, some preliminary scene setup work by Lozenger. We tried out a bunch more different shots, but unfortunately I lost their draft renderings. Here's what's happening in this shot. The hand you're seeing here, that's actually Enigma's model off screen. It's all animated outside of SFM because animating in 3ds Max is a lot less convoluted than doing it all in SFM. So it's all imported using FBX. Thank you Valve for adding that into SFM too, it is so useful, seriously. Special care had to be taken to create a smooth, natural transition into the darkness of the void of space. Because as I mentioned earlier, the Dota shader is very, very sensitive to lights when it comes to specular. Even if a light is extremely weak, specular still shines through noticeably, and it would completely break the illusion. Oh, by the way, while I'm on this frame, with Enigma bragging about how he's a god, I figured I should have this sort of visual nod to, well, this. It's a little heavy-handed, ha, but whatever. And that's why there's this little pose right before grabbing the galaxy. Anyway, let's take a look at the lighting. I'll break it down one light by one. First off, there's a faint blue volumetric in the background. It adds some depth without breaking the illusion on the sides. Then I've got the light coming from the center of the galaxy. It's a volumetric light with a fog gobo texture that just spins around on its own very slowly, like this. Then there's two more to actually light the hand. They do not come from the same angle at all. It's all fakery. This is the main orange light's point of view, and as you can tell, it is way off of the actual galaxy's center. When the galaxy gets grabbed, all of these get turned off except for the faint volumetric. Two volumetric lights parented to the hand fade in quickly. Two volumetric lights inside the hand fade in instantly. SFM does not support omnidirectional lights, so in fact there's just two lights in there, as you can see here. And by adjusting the near Z values on the lights, I've managed to make them look like they are shining through the gaps in between the fingers. However, the volumetric lights on their own aren't enough. I have three more lights which grossly fake subscattering on their own. The effect I was talking about earlier that sort of makes it feel like the light is shining through the flesh or the skin. After the hand releases the stardust, I figured having only the hand lit faintly in red wasn't enough, so I added back two more lights, which is in the transition again. At some point I tried to put the blue nebulae in the foreground, and while I really liked the result, I thought it hurt readability too much, so I decided against it. This shot sliding was unknowingly heavily reliant on the glitchy sample distribution. When that was fixed, it just kinda broke all of the lights shining on Enigma. So I'm just gonna draw arrows on this screenshot of the movie. This was a tricky one. I had to mix together two sets of lights. One for the Earth. It's lit much like in our real-world solar system, as if there was a sun somewhere off-screen. And then Enigma is lit from behind and from below, as if the nebulae in the background were the light source. And on top of that, there is light solely reflecting off of the planet on Enigma's face and onto his hands. There's also a very exaggerated rim light onto the planet and a bit of atmospheric glow. Let's try to walk through that in SFM. There's still a faint blue volumetric in the background, but there's also an orange one on the other side. There's a spotlight for the Earth, which, as you can see, slightly leaks through onto his fingers, but it kind of works for the radiosity light bounce effect. A volumetric light behind the Earth does the rim light and the glow effect. It tracks the camera that's panning to stay consistent within the position. Here are the lights shining onto Enigma from bottom, from behind. And finally, the light from the Earth shining back onto him, his hands and his face. Add all of this together and you have the final scene. The Earth is made of three separate spheres. There's the base one, and then there's two cloud layers which spin at a slightly different speed. They're also a little bit different. One is strong and the other is a little bit more weak, with only an emphasis on high-frequency detail. When the camera suddenly zooms onto Enigma, they all dial back to a position that looks best from the new point of view. Hey, tell me, doesn't this Earth remind you of something? This is my favorite detail from the movie, and I'm kinda sad that not a lot of people seem to have noticed it. Earlier, I was talking about details that really tied a cohesive universe together, and that's kinda part of it for me. Originally, I thought Enigma would be holding the Earth, or at least be much smaller compared to it. I also wanted to have the Mad Moon crashing down during that scene, but there was no way to really fit that kind of detail in with the rest, and it would have taken too much time to integrate properly. While the TI-5 short film contest was announced on May 22, the Reborn Beta and SFM2 were only released on June 17. Right before that, Lozenger had done a little draft of the quote biggest unquote scene of the film. For time reasons, I was thinking that Enigma would be popping out and then back into a portal all around the map, as a way to explain how he was seeing all these things. I thought it would save enough time. But in the end, going for the motion cut, where a scene transition is hidden into motion that carries over into the next camera, is a much better solution that also adds a lot of dynamism. Here are 6 drafts from June 6 to 10. The second shot where Enigma turned his head gets merged into the first one. I make him look directly to the right after popping out of the portal. It's funny to see how everything gets faster. That was me progressively realizing the time saves I needed to make. I invite you to rewind and take a closer look at the iteration of each shot. I think it's pretty interesting to see how everything evolved. On some of them, it's like playing Spot the Difference with myself. Like every other custom particle in the movie, the portal effect was done by Lozenger. And much like in shot 3 with the orange galaxy light, there is a volumetric that spins around on itself with a fog gobbo texture in order to really add to the effect. And as I just mentioned, the shot where Enigma turns his head and looks to the right, or his left, was merged into this one. The joke about Sniper ulting a creep to imply that he's a bad player was actually added pretty late. Originally, I thought he was just gonna auto-attack creeps with Mask of Madness on, which, if you've played Dota for a while, probably know that it's a really bad way to get last hits and gold when farming as Sniper. But it's not a very obvious joke, and in a 1 minute long film, I really need people to get jokes immediately. And on top of that, I did not have a model for Mask of Madness. Drawranger has a Mask of Madness cosmetic, but if you try to put it on Sniper, it becomes little devil horns, which I think is actually really fitting. Oh, also, you may have noticed that there are cards in the distance. They're meant to represent the base and the radiant ancient. I couldn't actually show the base in the distance because of the draw distance constraints that I talked about earlier. Due to time constraints, the camera animation in this shot needed a lot of thinking. I needed a continuity from the previous shot while also directing your eye from right to left, which is not an easy task because that's not really how we're used to read images. Across both shots, I place Enigma at the same spot in the frame so that your eyes don't get lost. Then, in less than a second, I refocus and pull away. We go from this to this. Then the shot finishes on a very slight pan that gives you some depth information. So this definitely breaks the 180 rule, and hopefully it's not too confusing, but I think it really makes the shot more visually interesting, even if it's not really conform with the quote-unquote rules of movie directing. In shot 5 to shot 6, I am not cheating Enigma's position, he stays in the same place. In shot 6 to shot 7, however, he gets moved to the right. Otherwise, I feel like the framing would have been off, and it would have shown the little hill that I added here, and I wanted to avoid seeing it from that side. Otherwise, it would have probably stuck out like a sore thumb to Dota players. I'll talk more about that hill later. This framing is halfway between the regular Dota 2 gameplay angle and what a quote-unquote regular movie would use. You see, I wasn't gonna reuse this angle because that's what the last shot was. I wasn't gonna switch to that angle either, because it is the exact opposite of what is shown to you in-game. If I'm gonna have an angle that's close to top-down, I should show it to you the way the game does, from south to north. Otherwise, it might be a little confusing and distracting. And if I had taken this shot, it would have shown the other end of the lane. And that's something I didn't want people to think about or even pretend was there, because when Spirit Breaker comes on the next shot, it's like, wait, how is he coming from that side of the map? He's on Dire, that doesn't make sense. What about the T1 tower, is it still there? If I don't show the other end of the lane, if I don't show that part, you don't think about it, and then Spirit Breaker's appearance is even more literally out of nowhere. The fun thing about Sniper's animation in this shot is that it's actually the death animation heavily edited and animated over. It's almost prophetic when you think about it, huh? Once you see it, I think it's pretty easy to tell which part was actually recycled. So, you might be thinking, wait Max, this is 2 shots on your timeline, what's happening? And guess what, I've put text here just for you. I can only parent Sniper to Spirit Breaker's head when he hits him. If he was parented the whole way through, his animation would have to be compensating in order to be able to stand still before the impact point, and compensating on such a huge scale given how much Spirit Breaker moves would create a lot of jittering. But I also have to change the Z-far of the camera on the fly, and this is not something I can do dynamically within a shot. Another thing to note, but which I cannot show when going frame by frame due to how the particle system works, is that Enigma's ambient particle is absent until Spirit Breaker passes by him. Otherwise, I would run into depth sorting issues, which is to say that his particle would show over Spirit Breaker's trail. He follows a path which is very curved. Of course, you can't really do that in-game, but from the movie's point of view, it's not really noticeable. After that, Spirit Breaker bashes Sniper off of his head, and there goes what is probably my favorite shot from the movie because it's really goofy. It's like BAM! 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 Alright, I went a little far here. This is one of the reasons I have this hill here. If it wasn't here, the field would feel pretty empty, and it definitely adds visual interest. This is the field without it. It's not as glamorous, for sure. In this shot, my global light has to cover a lot of ground. At the same time, I need to maintain the highest possible accuracy and resolution. I carefully animated the light's position, rotation, and parameters to closely wrap around what the camera could see at any given moment. Sniper's animation is all hand-keyed directly in SFM, because I did not have the time to build a cat rig in 3S Max just for him, or for any of the other characters either. So while I hate animating in SFM, I just had to wince and deal with it. As for Spirit Breaker, he's just recycling all of his in-game animations, just carefully mixed together so that it doesn't look too weird. This is the shortest shot of the film, clocking in at only 1.5 seconds. That's 45 frames. I don't really have much to say about it, besides the fact that I want to praise Lozenger's amazing particle work again. It really makes the Techie's minds look very nuke-y, if you see what I mean. It's just a lot of punch. I needed them to look a little more dense, so the way I did it was I took a copy of the main explosion particle and I just placed it a little more forwards and made it trigger a little bit late. It's staggered. I only just noticed that I used the wrong sound for the Techie's mines. I used the sound for the landmines instead of the remote mines. Then again, the landmines sound a lot more punchy, so I guess it's okay. Once again, due to the lack of HDR, there are a few issues in this shot. The clouds are a little overblown, which bothers me. And the explosion has some... It just looks really weird. I managed to kind of salvage it by making the leaves from the trees really be consistent with the way the explosion looks. If I had HDR data for proper over-brightening during color grading, it wouldn't look like this. And here you can see there's this sort of blue fringing next to this cloud, and the blue looks really saturated around the cloud. It reminds me of the bloom effect in the mid-2000s in games like Oblivion, where the bloom would really saturate the hell out of everything it was shining on, especially skies and grass. In both this shot and last shot, Enigma was not originally like this. He was not covering his eyes. Then Half was like, Max, you should make him look away from the explosion. And then I tried it out and I was like, oh, how did I not think of that? I'm stupid. I'm stupid a lot of time. Thankfully, there's people behind me to save my ass. Shout out to them. There's nothing particularly tricky about this shot. I do have to say though, the way Enigma just goes, oh. Like, he's so adamant accepting of it, and that is like, well, yeah, that's Techie's. Alright, I'm out of here. Better move on. I just find it so amusing. Zap 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 zap. It's time for some RNG goodness. If you paid attention during the drafts a few minutes ago, you will have noticed that Lion wasn't there back then. He was a completely last-minute addition. I was going over all of the movie and I was like, oh man, you know, that backtrack effect on Void, you really can't notice it very well. By adding Lion into the mix, that's 4 ultimate nukes, which are not killing Faceless Void. So obviously he's been backtracking them. That is RNG bullshit. But it's funny because that is legitimately something that could potentially happen in a game. We've all seen much stranger, crazier things. Adding Lion, however, means that there's 6 heroes on Enigma's team, and a few people actually noticed that. And I do wish these people would have noticed the other cool details instead. Lion's Finger of Death looks much worse, way more bland and flatter than it should. The reason for this is that I had to make a few changes to a particle system, or else it would have rendered like this. There is a very strange yellowness going all over the chronosphere's glow when it pops up. I'm not sure why it happens, but it does. Thankfully, it's all pure yellow, which makes it very easy to edit out into white in post-production. The chronosphere is shrouded in a blue mist. I'm actually just reusing the blue nebulae from the space scenes. I did this because normally the chronosphere has a thing to darken the ground, but it doesn't work very well at that angle, and especially not in the middle of the staircase. The chronosphere looked a lot less threatening than it should have been, and the blue mist kinda helped overcome that issue. This reaction shot has a blend shape made just for it. Once again, calling back to what I was saying when I was talking about the model, I don't have access to any of the flex controller rules. This includes being able to automatically divide flexes into left and right parts. Normally, I would make a blend shape that raises both of Enigma's eyebrows, and the engine, with the flex rule, would just take care of dividing that into left and right. It's called a stereo flex. But I don't have access to that. So the best and most straightforward course of action here was just to make a blend shape just for that shot. It sort of progressively fades in, and it's used in conjunction with a few others. Enigma is looking at this scene from the Radiant Ward Hill. It's one of the highest elevation points of the entire map, so I was thinking Enigma would pop out of the portal there and be an onlooker to all the scenes. Of course, that sort of scene setup really pales in comparison to what I have now. I don't want people to be confused when the camera shifts to Enigma on the hill, so I make sure to frame the shot to include a bit of the hill on the lower right. Just outside what the camera can see, there is a lot of stuff going on with the lights. Since I'm effectively doing a 180 turn, I have to make sure that all the global lights follow perfectly. The camera shift itself was surprisingly tough to animate. The rotation had to match with the position shift in a very specific way, or else it would feel very unnatural. A lot of trial and error. Let's take a look at the background. I have about 100 trees in there to create a more natural transition towards the painted image. It's not really rocket science, I just made about a dozen trees, placed them in a pattern that looked natural, and then duplicated it across the entire screen, changing a few trees here and there. In the final image, the depth of field thankfully does most of the heavy lifting. At first, I wanted the last joke to be Chen strolling down the mid lane and getting his 5 creeps minused one by one, with a shot showing on the outside of the river the enemy heroes with Midases, and slowly revealing Techies to be the 5th one. Because Techies with Midas is kinda ridiculous. Then it would have cut to a shot of Enigma's rage quit. However, this would have taken a lot more precious seconds for the joke setup, and it didn't really make a strong point towards teammates being bad or the enemy being complete bastards. Then I got the idea of item choices instead. My first choice was Battle Fury on any ranged hero, because ranged units cannot cleave, and then Radiance on Bloodseeker. But even though we may not like that hero build, sometimes Radiance Bloodseeker is not really that bad. Then I thought about Treant with Daedalus. The thing about Treant though, he's huge and he's a tree. He would have blended in with the background. The next logical choice was Crystal Maiden. Since she's a ranged support hero with very low base attack damage, 240% crits, well, you know what they say, 100 times 0 is still 0. On top of that, this makes all 3 characters in this shot blue, which really helps the readability and composition. The Daedalus model was made by Hoff. He based himself off of the in-game icon. And once again, because I need people to recognize the items as fast as possible, I used a red volumetric light to make it look like the icon, which has a red background. I'm also making Crystal Maiden hold it at the same angle. The Battle Fury is a weapon cosmetic for Faceless Void. I had to play with angles to get it to stay hidden behind Drow until she reveals it. SFM2 does not support per bone scaling yet, and since the Battle Fury model is locked to Drow's animation set, I have no way to change the scale. And at first, how big it was kinda bothered me, but now I realize it's better this way. I know I keep saying this, but it's really important. It's the last 5 seconds of the movie, and people need to recognize the weapons immediately. And also it's kinda humorous to see Drow with a weapon way out of proportion with what she usually wields. I wanted her to throw out her bow to the side, but I decided against it in the end. Well, no, actually it's just because this shot was done on the last day before the deadline, so I didn't bother spending extra precious time fancying it up. I realized too late that I used the wrong sun in the shop. I used the selling sun instead of buying. Whoops. The dynamic cloth is also kinda glitching out in this shot. It's partially caused by the fact that at maximum render quality, my system took a lot of time to render out each frame. There was a similar problem throughout the movie with the scrolling texture on Enigma. I had to edit the scrolling speed on each shot to be faster or slower depending on how much faster or slower my system would render out each shot. That has been fixed. The cloth, not yet. I had to make Enigma's animation much more simple and way faster to fit within the last shot. Originally, he starts out grumpy, he turns his head, he turns it back, and then he's like, wait, what? Is that a Battle Fury and Daedalus?
I'm gonna be a god, but scroll this.
And in SFM, not only did I have to make all of that much faster, that head turn, it's gone. And as you can see here, the transition to the, oh my god, that pose, just a lot faster. Alright, so now I'm gonna talk about what I would have done differently if I had been given more time, both in terms of the deadline date and the, the 1 minute constraint. Unlike the rest of the video, I'm going to do this all in one go. I'm not gonna re-record everything I say 5 times to avoid the as, the ohs, the uhs, and blah 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 blah, stumbling upon my own words like that. Alright, so here we go. First off, I gotta say, I really like the bokeh generation here in this shot, so I think I got the best possible one. Looks really nice composition-wise. And I do like the visual interest that those flying sparkles give before Enigma appears, but however, one thing that bothers me is that those sparkles, I mean, they're just kind of distracting after that, and it's like this weird black thing. You could maybe think of them as asteroids flying by or whatever, but the sparkles, it's like, it doesn't feel space-like, so I would have probably slowed them down. Man, I should have probably done that, because there's a timescale feature for particles. I didn't think of even using that. Like I said, I'm stupid a lot of time. The lighting, I wish I could have had some real nice stream light, but yeah, I talked about that quite a few times in this video. Maybe a bit more contrasted lighting, maybe a pose that feels a little better. Just something maybe that feels more threatening, more imposing, sort of. So same thing for the second shot, I really should have slowed down these these sparks. I like how, I would have probably changed the entire shot altogether. I like how Enigma just closes his fist, as I pan up. I don't like the frowning at the end. It just kind of looks cheesy. I should have changed that. I figured, it's okay. It's okay enough, but yeah, I would have probably made an entirely different shot altogether. I just probably tied in better with the next one. So things that I noticed in this shot that I probably would have changed. You can kind of see the lighting seam when he raises his hand, where the light stops. The hand in general is it's a little weird, sort of. Especially here around the finger, it just looks blobby, muddy. It's just a model issue, and the hands weren't intended to really be a big focus. So yeah, that's what happened. The lighting was really acting weird, and back then I didn't know why, because it was the glitchy, simple distribution in light radius that I talked about. So I would have fixed that. I'm okay with the rest. There's some noisiness, but I kind of try to fix that in post. The lighting here, after the hand opens, it comes back a little too fast, a little too early. Should probably, there's a little oddity right there. And I could have probably made it weaker at the bottom, because it makes no sense. But it's whatever. This shot, I don't have much to say about this shot. Well, actually I do, but I always have a lot of things to say. That's why I made this video anyway. Things that I would have fixed with more time, the neck deformation here. I talked about that during the rigging. The animation, focus on the animation of the hands and you'll notice it's a little weird. Especially here, right at the end, at the top too. It just feels a little... There's a little bit of oddity. Maybe you won't notice it because you didn't animate that scene, but I animated it, and then I did some stuff in SFM that kinda made that happen, so it bothers me, but whatever. I would have made the lighting on that hand weaker. I figured at first, oh, you know what, it's okay, whatever, but now I regret not trying to fix that. There's a weird oddity here, if you follow the line below the hand, it goes this way, but then, it's here, so, oops. So that doesn't make sense, right? So I would have fixed that. What else? You can kind of notice how the Earth snaps back to a better position to have the country, to have the lands, the continent framed during that zoom pod. But yeah. Oh man, you can actually see the Vertus down here. That's kind of nasty. Yeah, I would have probably fixed that as well. It's kind of nitpicking, but whatever. Okay, Earth scenes, here we come. So this is I would say this shot was directed in a very sober manner. It's just, you know, I had to linger on the sun long enough so that when it zooms into the eye and then zooms out of the sun, there needs to be a little bit of a lingering period, or else it just feels weird. So yeah, time constraints. If I had more time, I would have just done something fancier, but maybe it pulled back and framed the shot from within the trees back there. Just have something, you know, a little bit better, because it's a little at the left. It's just, yeah, it could be better. So despite this also being a shot that's born from time limitations, sort of, I actually really like it. What would I change in that? Yeah, the rocks on the left, just a little bit weird. So I remember somebody told me that the creeps at the end of the lane looks like they're moonwalking because of the way I pull back, and the depth of field kind of hide the way that they're getting closer. So maybe I could have just, you know, cheated it and made them run twice as fast. The particle for Sniper Assassinate Sniper Assassinate was never meant to be used across such small areas. So it's just weird. I think if you go frame by frame, you notice how it actually shows over the overcreep. So it's just weird, I guess, but you don't really notice it unless you go frame by frame, I guess, so it's okay. What else? Oh yeah, the cards in the background. I should have made them smaller in hindsight, because they do look a little weird. Oh man, and I forgot to hide stuff in there. I should have added a tree there to hide that. Man, it's amazing the number of things I'm noticing now, but I should have noticed earlier. What in this shot? This shot is okay, I like it. Maybe Sniper could have been scaled a little better. And Enigma's pose is really forced. It's a little awkward, but then I could pass it off as, you know, is an intercorporeal space being. He's weird. He doesn't know how to greet people or whatever. Sniper shot, it has a kind of weird lighting compared to the others. It's kind of bright. I would have probably made something better if I had more time for the lighting. I should have probably animated the beard a little, because it just looks very stiff. The beard, do you say beard or bird? No, it's beard. Okay, so the beard is actually a bone. It's not done using the cloth. Well, the cloth system actually uses bones. It's just like, they're just evolved jiggle bones in a way. Alright, so this shot, Enigma's animation looks a little stiff. So I should have probably made that a little more loose. You can actually see it here too, but it goes by so fast. You would really need a trained eye to notice it, I guess. I like the animation that I've done here, except maybe in a few parts where it looks a bit too loose. I feel like, you know, okay, so at first, you know, he bounces back onto the ground, so that's pretty funny. Then the second shot is like just thrown back, arms back. But the third time he gets hit, it's just the same thing as before. So I would have probably varied either the second or the third bash to have something different. Maybe, you know, a little twirling or whatever. But could have been a little funny, probably. So what I was saying earlier here, you know, I've covered the gaps in the trees. So that's good. Because you don't see the blue of the sky through them. And I forgot, so yeah, like I said, I forgot to do it in a couple of places. The mountain here in the background bothers me a little how you don't see it here, but you see it there. In theory, you could say with angles you shouldn't see it there, but still, it's a little bit off, really. And it just kind of clashes with those mountains, so with more time I would have just done more environment polishing. So this shot is okay, but the motion blur looks a little weird and very streaky. That's just the way the jittering works in SFM though, so not much I could work around. But like I mentioned earlier, the color correcting is a little weird. As you can see here, the explosion is just like the same tone of yellow. It's yeah, the color correcting could have been better on this shot. But it doesn't look that bad, and at least it looks consistent throughout the whole thing. So the trees here, the two trees on the side, you can clearly see that they're two different trees. Because originally, I think it was this shot over here. You see, from that angle, you cannot notice that there are two different trees. But from that angle, you can, so that's bad. I forgot to adjust that. This shot, it's okay. Maybe more stuff in the background, but it's alright. So here, the top left of the shot, I think it's a little bit, weird. It's like the blue feels artificial. The lighting could have maybe been just a little tiny bit more contrasted. But other than that, yeah, like I said, the backtrack effect, lion's finger. But composition-wise, I really like this shot. I just really like it has this sort of layered approach to it. It's just the trees framing everything. You know, I wonder if this would fit the golden mean or whatever, this is. The thing that goes in a circle. Is it the Fibonacci thing? I don't remember, whatever. And the very shallow depth of field just works pretty well. Almost makes it look like a tilt shift thing. So yeah, I like this shot. I think it worked pretty well. Okay, so here, this is actually something that bothers me incredibly, like a lot. When the camera goes onto Enigma, I feel like I should have smoothened out the transition more. I'm gonna go in slow motion, so you're probably gonna see what I mean. When it stops onto Enigma's face, I feel like it stops too fast, sort of. It should have been a little bit more loose. The transition after that, though, feels extremely natural, so that's good. But in this shot, I don't like what I've done with lighting. Like I said before, it just feels very flat. And it just has this... I just kind of screwed up the color correction here. The framing works well, but other than that, I could have done a better job with the lighting. Something I forgot to mention, I think, that Enigma's hand is really large during the face palm, so it was interesting to work around that, but still feels a little weird. I don't know. Just it kind of shows the shortcomings of the model. So here, the transition. I'm gonna play the transition a couple times and pay attention to the top right of the frame. See, it feels a little weird because the slow motion time here. When the camera goes down, it goes down into the trees, and there's this... there's like the dark trees here. Then it switched to the blue sky, and that feels weird. It feels like there's something flying in front of the camera at a really high speed. So I would have probably fixed that too. What about this shot? There's just a few of animation stuff. Some animation stuff. A little stiff in a couple places that I would have fixed with some more time. Other than that, it's fine. And, oh yeah, I think another one of my biggest regrets, I would have made the text, the disconnected from the game, whatever, the text, bigger. Probably, maybe not twice as big, but somewhere between what it is now and twice as big. Because the flash of disappearance from Enigma kind of hides the fact that it's appearing. And I need people to get, oh, okay, he's disconnected from the game, he's rage quitting. And the flash, just kind of hides the fact that text is appearing. So there's the disconnecting sound, and that kind of salvages that, but I should have made the text bigger. Alright, I'm gonna go again over the movie to see if there's anything else I have to say. I don't think so, I've talked about stuff here. The sparks. Oh yeah, I would have probably slowed down the galaxy, like I said, with the timescale of the particles. I would have slowed down the galaxy as well, because it's rotating pretty fast. What else here? Not much. Not much that I haven't already said. Although I really like the way the lighting came out on the hand here. See, this is the kind of lighting here I wish I had on the kind of like everywhere on Enigma, because like that just looks very nice, it just looks great, I think. what else? Maybe, yeah, more, once again, you know, soft, no, I guess it's fine. Maybe more trees in the background. The amount of flowers on the ground is nice here, but yeah, that spot again, should have covered some of that up. You could argue that maybe the framing's a little weird. It's like, if he's looking to the right, it shouldn't be on the second third of the image, but whatever. Here you see how the ground is flat, so if I had more time, you know, I would have made a not flat ground, especially the tiles on the ground here. Oh my god, that's gross. Here, once again, not much to say, the lighting here. Yep. That floating tree trunk. Maybe more tree, maybe more, a little bit more grass in the foreground. Maybe make the sky a little bit, a little less bright. It's a little, oops, it's bordering on oversaturated here. Sorry about that. Very nice red glow here. But yeah, other than that, what I said earlier still stands. I feel maybe the animation in Enigma, when it just kind of like, I don't know, sometimes I see it as too, I guess it's just the speed at which he pulls down his arms. Everything else feels nice except the speed at which he pulls out his arms. I mean, pulls down his arms. The way Enigma turns, I really like how I've handled that, and the little head lift when he says, oh, that worked well. Lina and Lion's animations, when they go back to their idle pose, maybe make the chronosphere effect even better here. I think usually heroes in the chronosphere get like a purple tint, so I could have probably done that. No, I like the framing of the shadow of the trees, the mountain. It just works really well. This Enigma's model, yeah, it just, I guess the shoulders. He has a very wide shoulder span. I remember originally it was even worse than that, and I had to tell Half, man, look at that shoulder span. It's, whew. Well, anyway, what else here? No, that's, yeah, the lighting, as I said. Yeah, I don't think there's much else I'd have to say. I'm sure a lot of people will find things to nitpick that I'm not thinking of right now, and I'm sure if I look back on the film in a year from now, I'll find more things to nitpick that, you know, I haven't thought of right now. But it's a process, you know. The more stuff you do, the more you train your eye, and that's how you grow as an artist. So yeah, I guess that's all I have to say about for now. Yeah, so that's the end of the post-mortem. Alright, so I hope this video has shed some light on the creative process that my entry went through, you know. Well, I hope I made it as insightful and informative and perhaps even as interesting as I could. If you have any questions, you know, the comments are here for you. I'll do my best to answer any of your questions. Yeah. Well, once again, thank you everybody, really. And yeah, that's it. See you later. Bye.